So the Reform UK civil war, after Zia Yusuf was effectively axed as chairman in a beautifully executed burqa ban ambush by its new MP Sarah Pochin, is also proof that you can no longer trust the mainstream media, including the newly centrist propaganda outfit GB News. Because I knew weeks ago that Nigel Farage had turned on Yusuf after that botched decision to report Rupert Lowe to the police for hurty words, a catastrophic example of woke lawfare against one of their own. And I reported it to you on April the 19th.
Since Yusuf decided to launch his unhinged bile at me for reporting the facts, I've discovered things are actually far worse at Reform HQ than even I had previously realised. Yusuf's fury appears to be that Nigel Farage is now openly saying it's a matter of when, not if, he departs the job after a succession of high-profile departures.
Yet despite that, despite my reporting, the MSM, including the right, remained united in their lie that Farage and Yusuf were together, despite the fact there was a full-on mutiny behind the scenes at Reform HQ, which only I reported on. Indeed, do you remember this? Yusuf called me a liar, and senior party figures tried to brand me an enemy, even though I voted for reform and view myself as a critical friend of what is quite clearly an insurgent political force. So why did they do that? Well, it's because they are there to spin an establishment narrative, to not reveal the truth. So here is the truth. Farage realised that promoting this political novice to the top job in his party, where he was infuriating and deriding its loyal base on a daily basis, based simply on identity politics, let me be blunt with you, the fact that he was a rich Muslim, was a shocking error. Now that Yusuf has quit in acrimony, and it actually happened while we were on air yesterday during a very dramatic episode, all of a sudden, within minutes actually, what I reported to you in April and was widely denied at the time is now being accepted as fact in the MSM. Now, I do credit Farage for realising Yusuf just had to go. He made it happen with Pochin's burqa ambush, and trust me, that was all plotted, it was all planned. Yusuf was said to be furious because reform seemingly supporting a burqa ban could scupper his plan to bring thousands of Muslims into the party. And by the way, if you're in any doubt that sectarianism is growing in British politics, just look at Scottish Labour leader Anas Sawar's response to Nigel Farage after beating reform in last night's Hamilton by-election.
What's your message now to Nigel Farage? He's probably bought a kilt now. He'll be up here more often, won't he?
All I'd say is good morning, Nigel. Eid Mubarak, and I hope you enjoy the result last night.
But I'm still not happy with the approach Nigel is taking publicly to the growing war within Reform UK, given, as you saw there, he blamed the use of fallout on outright trolls. You're talking about your supporters there, Nigel, who disagreed with Yusuf's treatment of Lowe. It was nothing to do with his race, for God's sake. But he's also blaming so-called Indian bots, rather than refusing to accept there is genuine support behind Lowe's mass deportation messaging.
The online reaction from Reform UK supporters and voters has to be said, quite a lot of happiness in the air that Mr. Yusuf has gone. Why do you think that is? What was it about the voter base of Reform UK that may have?
I think that the persistent campaign against him on X, and much of it coming from Indian bots,
right,
has perhaps, made some Reform members question him, question his motives. All of that's completely unfair.
And when given an opportunity to deliver a bit of an olive branch to Rupert and Ben Habib, the former Reform UK deputy leader, both of these guys are good men, by the way, beloved by the Reform base. They've both been treated abysmally. Did Nigel take it? Like hell.
And could there be a way back for them now? For example, could Rupert Lowe find a way back into Reform UK?
I'd rather eat razor blades after the way he's behaved and the things he said about us. No.
Ben Habib?
Good Lord, no. No, you can't work with people who, when they have the slightest disagreement with you on anything, go public the whole time. You can't operate in politics with people like that. If you're going to have disagreements, sit down over a cup of tea in a room and talk about it. Those guys chose to do it all publicly.
That response was just so disappointing, given Nigel himself admitted that Zia had been difficult, which is a massive understatement based on all that I've learned about his behaviour.
Farage, can I put to you, there have been a lot of talk about internal factions, of course. Rupert Lowe left the party under a bit of a cloud. Was there a conflict of personality between Zia Yusuf and Rupert Lowe? And also, what about rumours that swirl that people can find him difficult to deal with? Perhaps the fact he's so good at data. What about the humanity side? First of all, the rift with Rupert Lowe, was that anything to do with it?
No. We all had a rift with Rupert Lowe. Rupert's behaviour was unacceptable at so many levels. So this wasn't just Zia. All of us found him impossible to work with. So, that was that.
And he even came close to agreeing that Rupert should never have been reported to the police.
So a quick final question about the Rupert Lowe incident. Do you think that incident was handled well, particularly between reporting it to the police? Was that the right thing to do looking back?
Well, you know what? When you're a chairman, it's a bit like being a chief executive. You make lots of decisions. Most of his decisions were right. That one, well, maybe not.
You're saying perhaps it was...
Maybe not.
You're saying perhaps it was a mistake to involve the police?
I think you know what? You make decisions all the time. Some you get right, maybe some you get wrong.
So Farage's overall arrogance in terms of dealing with Rupert Lowe means that any chance of a unifying moment was immediately blown. With Rupert posting on X, Farage says he would rather eat razor blades than allow me back into Reform. Having sat with him as an MP for 8 months, I've already got plenty of them in my back. Farage and his ego are together and capable of building a team. He must never be Prime Minister. Nigel also failed to embrace Katie Hopkins, who helped precipitate yesterday's departure by Yusuf, who had reached out after his departure, writing, "Dear Nigel Farage and Reform, thank you, truly thank you. Looking forward to seeing you and your team in number 10. Anything I can do to help, I'm in." But what did happen is that the Reform propaganda machine soon wound up. That self-satisfied piece of shit Tom Hardwood, who is meant to be a journalist, literally told us the answer is simply to trust his co-presenter Farage.
I just think that 3 letters matter a lot in politics today. DUF. Don't underestimate Farage. I think I would be surprised if a large percentage of people who in the local elections voted Reform could actually name anyone in the party other than Nigel Farage. Yeah. They couldn't name Rupert Lowe, they couldn't name Zia Yusuf, probably not Sarah Pochin, or maybe Lee Anderson might be better known, but not actually as high.
You're right, the Rupert Lowe debacle didn't really make a mark, didn't make a dent really on the polling, did it?
I just want to pull my hair out. Seriously, I want to pull my hair out. Like, Farage is great in so many ways. Of course he is. None of us are denying that. But are you seriously, as a journalist, suggesting that we just trust one politician blindly and that it doesn't matter who else is in his movement when there's a bloody cabinet to fill? I mean, it's ludicrous. It's embarrassing. It is propaganda. Then Isabel Oakeshott, who, remember, has spent the past year describing Yusuf as the second coming, is now simply trying to say that his role was operational and we're all just meant to believe that his departure is meaningless.
I mean, and the reason that it's not such a huge deal also is because Zia Yusuf was relatively new to, as I said, to politics, and a lot of Reform supporters were not backing reform because of Zia Yusuf. That's no disrespect to him, but he had an operational role. He was very, very good on the media, and that was highly valued. But his role in the party was operational. Nigel was a leader, Richard Tice is a deputy leader. There are 5 MPs. Zia Yusuf had a role behind the scenes, really, at HQ. On the one hand, on the other hand, yes, he was doing media, but he wasn't the party leader.
Richard Tice, her boyfriend, by the way. At least Isabel, in this interview on Talk, did finally admit that there had been drama for months ahead of yesterday's blow-up. But obviously what's ironic about that is that was something that when I was reporting it at the time, her boyfriend Richard Tice was attacking me for while denying. But first, something really important to talk to you about. Scammers and spammers who are out there to ruin your life. Now, we've all experienced more and more of those spam emails, text messages, and robo-phone calls. Not only are they annoying and time-consuming to deal with, but they usually represent a gross invasion of your private information that can cause vast financial and reputational damage. By the way, how the hell did they get your information in the first place? Well, it's likely as a result of data brokers who know everything about you, your health, information, relationship status, mortgage details, and they sell it for a profit. Now, these data brokers can directly or indirectly expose sensitive information to bad actors, putting you at risk of identity theft. The number of data breaches worldwide rises every year. According to the annual data breach report by the Identity Theft Resource Center, it went up 72% in 2023 compared to the previous year. This means you and your loved ones are also at constantly increasing risk of data breaches as a growing list of data brokers hold your personal information. Now, that is then sold or published online without you even knowing about it. The consequences for that, well, I know you can imagine, but they can be shocking. Like health insurance companies could increase your rates based on your online activity. Huge loans have been taken under people's names without them even knowing about it. And scammers have even started to use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick victims into sending them money. These are called imposter scams, and they rely entirely on the data they can find online. Now, you could ask these data brokers to delete your personal information, but the process takes hundreds of hours to do manually and requires repetition. The good news is that today I have a solution for you. It's one that I use and personally endorse. So go to incogni.com/outspoken. You'll get 60% off an annual plan today. What Incogni does is reach out to these data brokers on your behalf, request your personal data removal, handle any objections from their side. The whole process is automated, ensuring that your data stays off the market by conducting repeated removals and taking down your data if it pops up again. This is what makes our yearly subscription especially advantageous. I do the annual plan. It means they're constantly taking me off these lists. And by the way, the process to set up, super simple. You just create an account, grant Incogni the right to work for you. They will contact the data brokers on your behalf to request your personal data removal. So go to incogni.com/outspoken and get 60% off an annual plan right now. It could be the most important decision you make. But now, back to the show.
I mean, it's interesting actually looking at polling on the issue of whether we in the UK should ban the burqa. There's majority of people in the UK actually in favour of that. But be that as it may, I think that Zia openly said he wasn't aware that she was going to ask that question. That was just a communications slip up. You know, it happens. Everybody's very busy. There's a by-election in Scotland today. You know, this sort of stuff happens. So I am sure that he didn't resign because of the burqa question. There's been stuff going on in the background for quite some time now. And my take on it is that it's really, really difficult, and in fact, virtually unheard of, to go from zero political experience, as Zia Yusuf had when he became chairman of Reform, into such a position in the party that is causing a political earthquake.
And is all of this Machiavellian drama an issue for reform? Remember, Isabel Oakeshott told us that reporting Rupert Lowe to the police wasn't an issue for reform. So this isn't either. Everything is fine.
Not in the slightest. And I know that reform's critics and all those who are terrified by the rise of reform will be desperate to say, oh, this is a catastrophe, this is a disaster. The party, what's really interesting now is the party is so much bigger than one or two or three personalities. This is a whole different beast to what it was even 6 months ago. So yes, it's disappointing. Nobody would want it to have played out in this way with Zia Yusuf, but he was just the chairman in the same way that, Richard Tice is just the deputy leader and Nigel is just the leader. There is a whole party here. It is a mass movement now, over 230,000 members, and more importantly, millions of people up and down the country that support reform. So it's bigger than individual personalities now. I know that's rough for Labour and the Conservatives to accept, but in a sense, reform is like them now. It certainly can survive a few issues with moving positions of personnel.
Sorry. I'm playing you that because this is why you've got to trust the independent media. This is why you have to trust journalists that don't have skin in the game, that don't have a boyfriend that's part of the party, that don't want to run as an MP. And it matters. It matters because if reform is our great hope, then we've got to keep them honest. And what this is just proving is that you have been lied to by Reform UK for the past 6 weeks, and that Reform UK will go after people even if they are telling the truth. Now, by contrast, there are commentators who I've trusted during all of this, so I think their analysis today is worth listening to. Former Brexit Party leader Catherine Blacklock posted a couple of weeks ago there was a rumour that many of the Reform Office staff had walked out because of Zia Yusuf, who reportedly was a bully, impossible to work with, and had certain way with women that wasn't appreciated. Charlie Sansom suggested Zia Yusuf resigns as Reform UK chairman after building the party up whilst diluting the message and alienating the best voices in Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe and Howard Cox. If Nigel wants to capitalise in a huge way, it's time to rebuild bridges and dedicate reform to the right. Calvin McKenzie said Zia Yusuf is no loss. Making untrue allegations against Rupert Lowe was the last straw. Pleased to see him go. Reform will be stronger. And the great Kate Hoey added, I agree with this prediction. And Harrison Pitt asked, what are the odds that Mr. Yusuf files a discrimination lawsuit against the party within the next year or so? Well, that's not an absurd suggestion, because Andrew Pearce in the Mail today has already put it out there that Yusuf is plotting revenge despite Farage's carefully constructed kind words towards him. He wrote, on Wednesday evening this week, an explosive cry rang out in the Reform HQ in London. How much longer do we have to put up with Zia? Demanded a senior figure in Nigel Farage's upstart party. And though Yusuf's ill-judged comment may have been the catalyst, I can reveal that his fate was sealed in March by his equally inadvisable decision to make an official complaint to the police alleging threatening behaviour by Rupert Lowe. Last night, I'm told Yusuf felt angry and humiliated, and mark my words, this will not be the last we hear from him. The fallout from the brutal treatment of Lowe continues, and these events speak of deep trouble at the heart of Britain's fastest growing political movement. I also think Stephen Wolfe, another casualty of Nigel Farage from his UKIP era, is worth listening to on this.
Welcome to Wolf's 1 Minute, another one. Dum-da-dum-dum, latest headlines, and I'm sure many of us, like myself, are delighted to hear the news that Zia Yusuf, useless chairman, of Reform UK, has resigned because he was dum-da-dum-dum. Yes, he was very dumb in calling Sarah Pochin, the Reform Party's newest MP, for criticising her and calling her dumb for raising the important issue at Prime Minister's question time that we should ban the burqa. After all, why not raise it at question time when Keir Starmer, so enamoured in rejoining the European Union and our membership there, should be questioned on whether we ban the burqa, which all those other European nations do as well. Well, not all of them, but a majority of the sensible ones already have done. However, rather than pointing out how well she's done and what a clever question it was and how you put the Prime Minister on the spot, Zia Yusuf called her dumb, and as a consequence of that, quite rightly, he's gone. He should have gone after Rupert Lowe and the way that he called the police and told them that Rupert, a man, was attacking him because actually he was dumb. And that's what's going to be the message about Zia Yusuf. In his charge, he is dumb. And all of those people in Reform who have been backing him for so long, saying he is a man of great transformation, a wonderful individual, are also dumb.
And now another one of those commentators I trust, Connor Tomlinson. Connor, I've been looking forward to talking to you about that. So there is the setup. What's your take?
Well, to borrow a phrase from Nigel Farage, when I heard the news yesterday, I started singing, "The sun has got his hat on, hip, 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 hooray." It was not a moment too soon to get rid of Zia Yusuf, considering his unconscionable conduct towards a bit passive-aggressive, but considering he called the police on Rupert Lowe for a completely spurious charge and had the man's house raided and all of his guns taken, and would rather see him rot in a cell on, again, bogus charge than be able to criticise first Nigel Farage and his leadership style and Zia Yusuf himself quietly, then just, speak his mind in a mail interview. No, rather than be open and receptive to critical friends like me, you and his own MPs, Dan, he would rather call the police on them, disparage them, exile them, and then, as Stephen Wolfe just put, call Sarah Pochin dumb. You are, I think, correct in the idea that this burqa question was not a simple communication error.
No!
I have heard that considering Zia Yusuf tried to maintain an iron grip on messaging, something that Gawain Towler said earlier on GB News, so, it's out there in the ether, that they did not tell him about this for a deliberate reason. And they wanted to see the reaction and to see whether or not it would drive a predictable wedge between him and the base, because Zia Yusuf is not a popular figure. He was brought in at the ground floor, gave one speech at Birmingham, clapped like he was the second coming of Nelson Mandela, and then instantly elevated to the top job despite lots of people waiting in the wings who are much more loyal to the cause for many years being passed over. And I can tell you what, Dan, it's not just Indian bots or the alt-right, as Nigel said in that, let's say, hostage video, really. Yes. And there's a reason for that I'll mention.
I'm going to be really, really nice in the hope that Zia Yusuf doesn't call me Islamophobic in the future.
Well, not just that. It's not just Islamophobic. Zia Yusuf has the potential to basically fart in the lift on the way out as the doors close. Because remember, he's still co-director of the company. Mm-hmm. And so that means
and he's
that
still got his shares.
Yep, and he knows all of the internal data. And as Harrison alluded to, it may not be likely, but he could still claim discrimination laws by some sort of corporate law and hoist the company by its own petard and scupper the one chance that we seem to have of a patriotic populist movement coming in from outside of the Uniparty. I do find it fascinating, though, the idea that it's just the alt-right who would criticise Zia Yusuf, who've been misled by Indian bots. The alt-right, by the way, in American terms, means white nationalist. Yes. So unless Nigel Farage thinks that most of his supporters, his deputy leader, and Rupert Lowe are white nationalists, I would have to question, why are they in the party in the first place? The idea that it was just them, no, because as you will know, Dan, because you've probably spoken to similar people, there are old guard members of the Brexit Party days and UKIP and that who have had some, let's say, colourful language, some French insults for Zia Yusuf anytime his name has come up, and a sincere level of frustration that basically he's been deterring donors and deterring defectors by his petulant conduct.
Well, yes, indeed. But I'm sorry, Connor, and this is something that is so disappointing for Nigel Farage to buy into. This idea that criticising Zia Yusuf in some way makes you racist is the most backward thing that a populist movement, an anti-woke movement should be fighting against. Because let me tell you, all of my criticisms of Zia Yusuf came after he'd shopped Rupert Lowe to the police. Now, yes, there were questions to ask about his views on Islam, about the Muslims that he was bringing into the party, right? But that is a separate conversation. My personal criticism of his conduct was all down to his treatment of Rupert Lowe. And to suggest for a single second that was at all based on racism is sick and twisted, and it's not something that Farage should be doing, given he's faced the same thing his entire career.
Yeah, he's just building a straw man to burn, and I don't think that's fair. Number one, it's a strategic disadvantage to him to try and appease the Westminster media bubble that would rather see reform capsize than succeed. I mean, the BBC today, for example, said that Zia Yusuf's departure spells doom for reform because they needed a Muslim chairman to get rid of accusations that the BBC thinks are credible that the party's racist. Bear in mind, the BBC does all it can to prop up Hamas these days, so excuse me.
Oh my God, yes, you're so right. And by the way, I also saw Robert Peston talking about him on Woke ITV, and Robert Peston said, yeah, I was interested in this guy. I went for lunch with this guy because he wasn't a normal reform person, because he was Muslim, because he wasn't white. So it's like you are playing this dangerous game of constantly trying to appeal to what the mainstream media wants reform to become.
Quite, and if Robert Peston has endorsed you, well, perhaps you should rethink your entire personality. But as far as Zia Yusuf's criticisms, yeah, reporting Rupert Lowe to the police, absolutely immoral. Refusing to ever speak to Ben Habib while he was still deputy leader, sheer incompetence. But also there's many other things as well, deterring investment, his treatment of Rupert Lowe deterring defectors, treating branch chairs unceremoniously, having a dictatorial way of controlling the party's messaging, which he tore himself in half like Rumpelstiltskin when the burqa question slipped him by, which shows his sort of control freak nature over that. And then frankly, and again, I've met Gawain many times, he's a nice chap, we disagree on some politics, I think he's a bit too soft for me, but the way that he sacked Gawain Towler was downright rude and disrespectful, especially considering he's a relative newcomer. And Gawain has been nothing but charitable and an ardent defender of the party off his own back on the media rounds in recent months. So to treat him like that was just unnecessary. It rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way, and I think that reform now has an opportunity, though I think Farage sort of scuppered it in that first interview immediately after. But it has an opportunity to try and make amends with people and reform its image and try to live up to the potential that a lot of its supporters, me and you included, Dan, wanted to.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.